Hello.
Hello. I don't believe that Gaurav is going to be joining us. I think he's on a slightly different schedule.
Okay.
So we'll just have to have him watch this kind of ex post facto.
Okay.
And then obviously Sanjana is absent for other reasons.
Mm.
So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, so today we're going to talk about some of the things that are going on in the sales department, what that looks like. One of our issues at the moment is that we're not closing appointments with our sales, and that is just as a byproduct of us not being able to effectively move our communication from one point to the other, be moving toward the close. Um, we had another issue, not calling anyone out specifically here, but we had an issue with people not going up and actually reading all of the previous responses and messages that were going on prior to sending messages, which means we ended up breaking the emotional connection, because we maybe introduced ourselves twice or didn't try to reestablish rapport after, a gap of several months of not talking to them. Um, when it comes to moving things over and assigning level turnover, when we're properly escalating to 2 and 3, I don't know if there's a gap, but it seems as if we're having some issues with people being able to properly move people from one level to another, and when to do that. So we're going to be talking about that. Um, as far as rapport is concerned, I've been noticing a lot of statements that are kind of beating around the bush. We're not focusing our conversation in a good enough way to not only build rapport but also move towards a close. So we're going to be talking about that, and we might be using inappropriate starters also at level 1. Just by virtue of not actually reading the about section. Planning out in a good way. What it is that we're going to use for a starter. So what's going to happen here is I am going to start going over all of the messages that are sent. And that's the only way that I'm going to be able to follow up behind and see where our gap is. Manoj has added a little tool into the script so that I'll be able to see all of the messages that are done by date and be able to go to each one of those links individually just to follow up on those conversations and see where everything is going. Um, and part of that will, of course, be knowing who's logged in, so I can do some one-on-one conversations just to address some specific issues. Not trying to call anyone out here. The idea here is to improve the process so that we're getting the kinks out of it. And then one of the things that's also going to happen is, because we are dealing with multi-million-dollar clients here, is if we're not using effective level 2 rapport conversation, it's probably going to look like maybe taking some of the people who are trying to do level 2 conversation and then putting them back down to level 1 for a little while until they can demonstrate that skill. And it's just going to be, until we have the capacity to be able to trust that those conversations are moving in the right direction. Because right now, we're sending out lots of messages, but we're not getting any results, and there's a reason for that. All right, so as a manager, and when we have people move into a management role, if anyone is interested in being a sales manager, we have to be completely caught up on all the sales training. You have to be able to demonstrate all of the behaviors that it is that we're trying to do. Um, you have to be able to build rapport with all of the individual people who are on the sales team so that they look to you as a leader. You're going to have to know about the performance pie. We were just talking about that in a previous meeting here about how to address issues when they're happening. And you have to be able to have one-on-ones with people when they're not up to snuff. If there's a problem, if there's a gap, so that you can meet up with that person and create a plan. You can't be afraid of confrontation. And then we're going to continually be trying to move people up to level 2 and 3. And the reason is that as this enterprise continues to grow, we are going to need more people doing messages and holding these conversations. So that means that as new people come in, We have to have consistent, effective people who are able to train those new candidates. So once we get into someone into that management role all the way, we're also going to be talking about onboarding, just in making sure that everyone is following up with their training, getting their questions answered. When we go to execution, one of the things that's not happening right now is we're not really getting any KPIs out of these messages. We need to start having an aggregated amount of those messages and getting a sense of how many actual appointments we're getting. And right now, if we have a key performance indicator, it's how many appointments are closed off of messages. And right now that number is 0. So that's not a really great KPI to be at. So I'm going to be identifying some of the gaps here. I'm going to have to personally go into some of these conversations and start trying to turn them around, because I was talking with Manoj today, and if we can't get the momentum going on in the sales situation, by the time that we get into mid-November and we start moving into a new quarter, and we start having some of the northern hemisphere issues with the pandemic, we might get completely robbed of momentum, and that's not something that we can afford to do. And what that looks like is me having to step up and probably work quite a few hours in order to be able to catch up some of this work until we can all get on board. And I'm willing to do that, but I really want everyone's buy-in that we're going to be trying working on these skills and try to do that honestly and in earnest. And if you get to the point where you just 100% feel like you can't do the role, I need people to speak up, so that if we need to get new people, or if you need one-on-one training because the gap is just because you need to be trained again from the ground up, we need to know that so that we can take care of those problems. If you're feeling completely lost, I need you to speak up so that we can do that. So when we go in to do the check-in for stand-up, really want us to be able to have some positive results to share with Manoj. It's important that every single one of our departments is moving in a positive direction, that we have our eye on the prize. So to this end, I'm going to stop share here. Manoj, would you be kind enough to share your screen so we can dive into some messages,
Yeah,
just so
yeah,
that we don't have to go into AWS and all of that, and just have you
yeah,
pop
yeah,
it up on your end?
of course.
And what I want to do is I want to kind of dive into some of these conversations, and we're going to talk about what we think a good message is going to be to go on in these conversations. Let's actually show you what it looks like, and let's get our feedback, give you guys a chance to practice, and I want to be able to answer any questions in real time that you have. Is everyone confident with that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. All right. So going up in our messaging history, we first contacted this gentleman back on August 13th. We kind of sent him a basic message asking him about what's going on with him. Um, let's see, and then it looks like his response was 5 days later. So now we kind of have a sense of his rhythm. He didn't respond to message for 5 days, and it looks like he's having some issues with his time management. Looks like he's feeling a little overwhelmed. And then Manoj hit him back, kind of relating to those problems, and then tried to generate some excitement, ask him about his projects. And it looks like, did we message him twice in the same day?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So maybe we broke the emotional connection a little bit there because we didn't wait for his answer, right? So that's maybe something we could have done better. You guys see that?
Of course, of course.
And then now we're looking here, we're at September 16th. We didn't get any message from him because we kind of made him feel like we threw an advertisement at him, right?
Yeah,
So now we're trying to reconnect. And one of the things that we did here is we re-mentioned, developing recent challenges and being a dynamic problem solver. So we're kind of selling ourselves at this point instead of continuing to build rapport. So what we should be doing here at level 2 is trying to resonate with what he's said to us so far, because he opens up, he tells us a little bit about himself. He's talking about time management, he's talking about trying to juggle social media marketing, development of online course, coaching, podcasts, all this stuff. And we didn't really relate to that information. We didn't spit it back at him. we didn't talk about those issues. Instead, we hit him with the form response, and then later on, we hit him with something else that kind of looked like a template response a little bit too as a follow up. And the reason we had to follow up in the first place is we didn't really recognize his contribution to the conversation, right? Does everyone see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see how the ball was kind of dropped on this one? Do we see where the disconnect was?
Yes.
So let's say that we wanted to recover this conversation. Now, it might be, after a month that we won't be able to, and that's okay, but we're going to use this as a learning experience. All right. If we go back up to his message and we're looking at his message about his challenges, time management, social media, what's a message that we could say to him at level 2 that would get his engagement and make him feel like he's talking to a real person and maybe possibly open up again? What I want you guys to do is I want you to open up Zoom chat, and I just want you to give it a go. I know that we may not necessarily have Grammarly here, thrown into Zoom chat. I'm not going to tear anyone apart for that, but I want to see the content of the message. What do you guys think it's going to look like? And everyone give it a go, and then when we're all done, I'll show you what I would do. Okay? So just take about 30, 40 seconds here, think it over. Oops, sorry. I keep on remembering it's shift enter to go between lines and not enter. All right. After you're done, just go ahead and push enter, kind of see where we're at. We'll kind of discuss all the responses that we got, and then I'll show you my answer, and then we'll see what's going on as far as that's concerned. We need to start doing more of this organic training, because this is going to give you a real sense of what having these organic conversations with these people looks like. And one of the things to bear in mind here is that each one of these contacts, I mean, it could be a 200 million, 300 million, 2 billion, 5 billion net company CEO that we're talking to. Not dropping these conversations and disconnecting from them emotionally, it's huge in that narrative. Okay. So we got one from Manoj. Just need everyone to spit one out, and then we'll talk about them. Good, Karan, thank you. Just need one from Abhishek and Leslie. You guys still working over there, or did I lose you? Just want to double check.
We're here. Thank you.
Okay. There's Abhishek, and perfect, perfect. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the approaches we had here. Um, so Manoj got kind of solution oriented, right? You can see you're having some challenges with time management. And then he's kind of asking, well, have you gone to any solutions so far? So it's not a bad response, right? Um, the advantage to this is we are relating directly to what he's saying. It's conversational. One of the downsides is we didn't relate to him, right? He's kind of exposing a vulnerability, and as a fellow business person, if we kind of bare our throat a little bit and expose a little bit of our own vulnerability, we might be able to build some rapport with him, right? Because as we were talking about before, rapport is built by people being able to identify with one another, to relate emotions, right? So we had some good stuff that was there. Then we had maybe one thing that could have been different or better. We'll look at Karan's here. So Karan was very solution oriented too, right? You're on a tight schedule. What usually takes up most of your time? What do your priorities look like? Now, on the plus side, we're kind of going out of in the position of being able to give him advice. On the downside, we are kind of trying to offer to solve a problem for him without continuing to build the emotional rapport first, right? We sent him a single message. He exposed he was having some time management issues, and then we went right into solving his problem instead of making him feel listened to. Let's look at Leslie's here. Um, Now, Leslie, she tried to turn it into a more of an emotional question. You got a lot of things going on. What's the thing that you enjoy doing? Right? That's a good way to build rapport, right? So that's one effective way of
Yeah.
being able to build rapport is to redirect. Now, redirections are most effective if you find that a person is being exceptionally negative. That's when it's the best. You want to redirect them to something that's a little bit more positive. Um, as far as building rapport is concerned, though, again, we didn't really relate to him too much. We just kind of asked him another question to try to make him more positive. So that's something that we did well, and then maybe something we could have done better. And then, all right. So, and then Abhishek is kind of doing more of a follow up message like, hey, it's been a while since we connected, and that's good because we're kind of trying to focus on that whole lost connection thing. Hey, I'm trying to reach back out. Um, has it become, has time management gotten better or worse? So Abhishek kind of hit it on the head here because, we're acknowledging that maybe we haven't talked in a while. But one of the issues here is that we've kind of sent this guy a couple of messages at this point, and we're trying to follow up with them. Um, I do like, however, because Abhishek has something that my message missed, which is that, hey, we're acknowledging that it's been a while since we talked. So I was a little bit more focused on teaching you guys the emotionality of it, so I'll show you mine. I said, Jay, I totally understand how you feel. Time management has probably been one of the biggest challenges for me as I've grown. As for juggling social media and a podcast, I started to really feel overwhelmed as I started putting on more and more hats. Have you mostly gotten things under control at this point, or are you starting to feel like there's just not enough hours in the day? Manoj. So, what was different about my response than some of the other responses that we saw?
You're acknowledging his.
Yes. You. Sorry to interrupt. Something.
Yeah, no, go ahead, go ahead.
Uh, the first thing I noticed that he's mirroring his response, that time management challenge. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I totally understand how you feel. Time management has probably been one of the biggest challenges for me as well. So you're kind of mirroring him, putting him yourself in his shoes
Right,
to show.
exactly. Because what is the goal of rapport? Remember, we're trying to think about what the goal of a rapport building conversation is, and that is to get someone to put you into their own peer group and see you as an equal. So we have to talk about and relate to the challenges that we're seeing in a message in order to come across as, emotionally receptive people, to be the kind of person who's going to be able to give him advice. We also have to be like him. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right, so what I'm going to do in the spirit of my own continuous improvement here is we're going to try to reset this, and I'm going to actually add a line here inspired by Abhishek because we want to see if we can maybe get this together. Now, can we see the last date that we talked to him, Manoush? Was it the 18th, September 16th? So it's been a week. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to do this. Go back here. I'm going to go back into my message real quick. So this is my new response that we're going to send. What we're going to do is we're going to try to reestablish the emotional connection with Jay and see if we can get him to actually message us back, even though we kind of, maybe didn't do the most fantastic job up until this point. So I said, Jay, really sorry about that. I was experimenting with some new AI machine learning coding for social media messaging and realized I sent a couple of form responses to some of my contacts. The testing phase has been a little frustrating, but I'm super glad I did it. I learned a lot about interfacing with platforms like LinkedIn. I totally understand how you feel. Time management has probably been one of the biggest challenges for me as I've grown. As for juggling social media and the podcast, I started to really feel overwhelmed as I started putting on more and more hats. Have you mostly gotten things under control at this point, or are you starting to feel like there's just not enough hours in the day? So we've acknowledged that we sent him some messages that didn't make any sense, made him feel kind of validated for maybe sharing something with us, and maybe we weren't quite as effective in being receptive to it. And then we've tried to redirect the conversation to sales. Does everyone see why I went through that process and I did it the way that I did it? Do you have any questions about that?
You can see it, the message.
Yep, should be able to see it on Notepad. I think everyone else can. Is that good for
Yeah.
everybody? Do you feel like I hit the mark, but gave us the best chance of saving that message? Do you guys see why I did that?
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you see how this might at least have a percentage chance of getting that emotional connection back? Do you guys see what the end result is supposed to look like? So we'll send that one
Yeah.
off. We'll give it a go. We'll see if maybe we can get Jay back into our sites or not. See if maybe we can be forgiven a couple of our mistakes there. And we'll go ahead and have Manoj pull up another one. And we'll see if we can't maybe do another couple of conversations here so that we can get a little bit more practice. Everyone feel confident with that? All right, so what's going on here? We messaged him on the 16th, right? It looks like he was doing stuff in tech startups, so can we double check his profile? Let's make sure that we sent the correct conversation starter to him, right? It looks like he designed a ride sharing platform and he started delving deeper into being able to solve that one solution himself, right? And it looks like he's been basically in that role for 10 months. And then before that, he was doing Crunch Hire. which is a management consulting startup. I don't know if I would talk to him about his tech startups, right? Do you think we hit the mark on that one? Does he really seem like a tech startup kind of guy? When you read that about section, did you get the feel that he's just been doing a bunch of tech startups and that's maybe the way to start a conversation with him? In fact, it looks like what we did here, if we look down into the as a result paragraph here, is he's been doing a project consultant for Fortune 500 companies. That's not too startup-y, right? And it's not even focusing on tech. So what are some of the conversation starters that may have been a little bit more effective for this message? Anyone want to help me out here? You want to go through some of the examples, Manoj, and just kind of click the conversation starter, see what some of these options are for him?
I think the change in industry or change in career would be
Right.
something that would be more appropriate.
It was really interesting to read a little bit about your experience with ride-sharing startups. What's a surprising takeaway that you had from that, right? That could be a good conversation starter. Would that have been better than trying to say that he's had an impactful career in tech startups? Probably a little better, right? Because he kind of led
Yeah.
with that as far as his passion's concerned. We're trying to get a conversation out of him. Let's take a look at a couple of other looks here. We've got different industries, right? Well, it looks like
uh, in his about section,
uh-huh.
there's a point at the time
At
Olave
the
was
time,
on a
a
steady
steady
career
career
path. He
path. He
loved
loved
his
his work, right? And not so much dreamed of something different. And we recognize the inherent deficiencies in the ride-sharing industry as
yes.
a whole. So, you know,
We can use that one. Out of all these industries, I guess you would not have imagined yourself working in this industry. There was a starter like this.
right, that could be a way to do it. Absolutely. So far, I think the read about one is probably our strongest, right? Let's try the next one. What's the next one, Manoj? I've been meeting a lot of people from the blank industry lately. Well, we probably haven't been meeting a lot of people in the rideshare industry. That's probably not a good fit. Let's try the next one. I see that you've been at blank for blank years. It's not going to work for a guy who's been in his current role for 10 months, right?
Yeah.
I don't actually know a lot about the field of ride sharing. Has being involved in that changed your perspective on how the rest of the world does business? That could be okay, right? Not necessarily our 10 out of 10 conversation starter, but it's not that bad. It would be better than what we picked, right? And he hasn't been raising money, not in this particular capacity, right? He was doing management consulting before and working with Fortune 500. Probably doesn't meet a lot of celebrities in the ride sharing industry. And then we don't have a ton of common connections in common with him. We don't both have a podcast. And ride sharing might be an industry that's hit hard with what's going on in the world right now. That actually could be a decent conversation starter, right? So that's maybe two solid options we've got. And of all the industries you get involved in, ride sharing seems like one you might not have envisioned yourself in before you started. What got you interested in that? But he talks about, and at the beginning, first sentence of his about section, following a series of unsatisfactory experience with ride sharing platforms. So he probably already has kind of mentioned that in almost his introduction about himself. Otherwise, it would be a good question. So can you guys see how picking a conversation starter that actually works for that client is going to be a lot more effective? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to try to save this conversation. However, I want you to notice something. We don't have that little icon in the lower right-hand corner that says that he's read it. So that doesn't mean that we've gotten a negative response, just that he hasn't seen it in the last 7 days. So despite the fact that we maybe didn't pick the perfect conversation starter, He did mention IT at one point in his about section. Maybe he'll respond. So at this point, we're just going to have to wait and find out, because since he hasn't read the first message and it's only been a week, about the only thing we could do would be a follow-up message, and it might be a little soon to do that.
Yeah, here's the IT experience.
Yep. And that's all that we had, was just that with his IT experience. And then we kind of latched on that and all of a sudden decided that he does tech startups. So we'll see if he responds. Hopefully he does. But on this one, we don't have anything to add, and it's a little too soon to do follow-up. Is everyone kind of on the same page with that one?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So
Let's do another one here.
10 days then?
Yeah, let's do 10 days. That seems good to me.
So just to check, Anshar, if we see that the first message has not been read or anything like that, do we just have him forward for an additional 5 days rather
You
than
know,
sending
if the
a
message has never been read and that has never ever been opened, then sending a bunch of follow-up messages isn't really going to help us too much. You know, that's an issue there. If people aren't reading their LinkedIn messages, taking a bunch of time and effort to try to continuously follow up and hit them with more messages. You know, they didn't answer the first phone call. I don't think ringing it 10 more times is going to help. I don't know if you have a contrasting opinion on that, Manoj, but that's kind of where I sit. What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree with you. I agree with you.
All right. So let's see here. Looks like we have been talking, right? Hi, Holly. Welcome to our network. Okay, we kind of hit her with a big form response, but that was quite a while back. When was that? What was that date? April 21st, right? So let's go down. We didn't get a response, right? Because she read it and she was like, "Oh wow, that looks like a big form letter," right? And then we hit her again with another form response on May 5th, and then we didn't get anything back. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to try and rescue this conversation. I'm going to use that same little bit that I used with Jay. Now let's see if we can find an actual conversation starter with it. So let's go to About for Holly and see what she actually does. She's a co-founder, CEO, rebuild trust between experts and their clients. She's been working 8 months, and it's a pre-seed startup trying to get people to communicate better with their customers, hiring contracts, and negotiations, and a marketing manager. So we're going to kind of incorporate that, see if we can't rescue this. I'm just going to kind of show you guys how I would do this, because we kind of, you know, made a boo-boo here.
Well, that's why I'm not a good salesperson, right?
Oh no, you're good. You're good. I'm not attacking you, Madhuj. I'm trying to
No, but
rescue the
I'm telling
emotional
you,
connection.
this is me, right? I this is all my doing. Oh my.
Oh, so Anshar, while you're doing it, let me just go back on the question. So what procedure would be followed if the connect did not respond, say in at least a week or so? Do we just keep putting them back until they responded, or how will we go about that so that we would
Well,
not be just
if a
sending
person's read
just my message there?
the message, but they're not responding, that's what our follow-up messages are for. And we usually want to gonna give them, like, you know, 2 to 3 weeks to try to respond to a message before we try and send the follow-up. And then the ultimate goal there is to hit them with a few follow-up messages, you know, at maybe 2 or 3 week intervals, see if we can't get them to start talking. And then if they don't, well, they're a dead lead. And that's what that big red link is for.
But if it's not read altogether, just let's just put them back until they responded or read it.
Yeah, we're trying to follow up with them a few times, kind of give them a chance to actually join in the conversation. If it doesn't happen and they're incommunicado, then that's just the way it is. Some people don't respond to LinkedIn messages at all. Some people only respond to people that they know. That can happen, and that's why we have that option for the dead lead to get them out of the system, and we stop trying to contact them.
Got it. Thank you.
So this is an example of how I would try to see if maybe I can't save this conversation. Holly, I went ahead and did the AI thing just because she's got a marketing background and she probably understands, when you're trying to hook up new stuff for advertising that happens. And then, having a history in marketing yourself, I'm sure you understand. I was reading about Marilyn a little bit about what you do. When you talk about reestablishing trust with experts and their clients, what are some examples of that? I found it really interesting, Manoush. So we started with an apology in the very first line. Why did we do that? Well, let's be honest, the last 2 messages that we sent her were kind of form responses. So by giving her that first sentence that she's 100% going to look at and having an apology in it, that makes the person want to actually read what you have to say. That's our gamble there. We tried to relate it back to her history in marketing and then change the conversation to something that she's passionate about, which is Mariluna. Because if you can get someone to talk about something that they're passionate about, they'll forget that you accidentally spilled your coffee on them. So that's kind of what we're trying to do at this point. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Any questions
Yes.
about that process? Do you see what kind of extra lengths we have to go to if we make a mistake and we break an emotional connection? Do you see how much harder that makes it? Can you see how much harder it's going to make it for us to close that call? Each time that we break the emotional connection, it starts to affect that.
Yeah.
All
Right.
right, so we're going to send that message to Holly. We're going to try and find another good one for a prospect here. Maybe we'll get something that's a little bit more. Remember, we're going to set that. I think we needed to do contacted for her, Manoj, right?
Well,
She was on unknown, I think.
okay.
So what do we do if we need to go back one in that list? Or do we have to type in the URL? What do we have to do there?
That's
Let's say we
okay.
forgot to hit it.
No, that's okay. We'll follow up with her in 10 days. I mean, this is just way to keep track of it. It doesn't like
Sure.
not very.
Yep, no problem. I was just pointing it out. All right, let's take a look. Adam Vasquez. Okay, we talked to him all the way back on October 31st. We asked him, what is your core business? He didn't respond. Maybe too general. Maybe that's why. Actually, that was actually a really good follow-up you did there, Manoush. Hey, LinkedIn's best platform for networking. Realize I've dropped the ball on utilizing it properly. I'm trying to fix that. We've been connected for a while, so let's treat this as a re-engagement, reconnection. I'm all excited to hear what you do at Merit, how you're making a difference. Is he still at Merit? Let's hope so. Is he still at that? I'm assuming he is.
Yeah.
Merit, founder and CEO, 5 years. Yeah. Okay, market invention. Okay, so it looks like maybe we need to kind of get personal here because he's read 2 messages at this point. He's actually active on LinkedIn and we didn't get a response out of him. So let's take a look at his activity post here. He said, congrats. How long ago was that? I think we might just have to click on the actual congrats to see that post, maybe. Okay, and he was saying congrats 3 weeks ago to. Okay, so apparently his friend was an investor and he managed to get his book up, but that's not going to help us build rapport. It was worth a look. Because sometimes, let's say someone puts a activity on their post and they're super into getting dogs adopted or something. We might have a chance for a conversation and to see what we maybe would do. What else we got? He's talking about resulting in billions of market value. So let's open up his about here. Let's dive into this guy. He's a best-selling author and a sought-after public speaker. So we know that we have a script conversation starter for public speaking, and we know that he likes giving advice. So let's take a look at our conversation starter for that. Yeah, let's do that. So let's just, we tried doing some basic conversational stuff. Anything that had that form top and form bottom on it wasn't getting a response. Let's just send him a sentence, like an actual person, and let's see if we can't get him to actually give us a response. Because we haven't really dropped the ball here. It seems like maybe he kind of bristled up because it looked like a template response. So let's see if we can get around that, send him a human message. Do you guys see why I'm saying to do that?
Yes.
Are you guys following me on this process? Do you guys see what the
Yes.
Yes.
purpose is here? Is it crystallizing for you?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So let's send it. Let's see if we can't do that. We'll try following up with them in a few days, maybe 5 days, something like that. Yep, perfect. All right. So do you guys understand the process? Do you guys see why thinking about how you're going to connect, relating to the emotions of these people is going to make the job of all of the people who are at higher levels easier? Do you guys see what it looks like? Do you have questions?
Questions for you.
No questions at the moment.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I am going to start following up on all the messaging conversations that we've been having. I'm going to identify some specific conversations where we might have some gaps. I want you guys to really be mindful of the idea that the initial message and the process of building rapport is really about getting that person to share and then sharing yourselves as Manoj and then getting that sense of connection and then moving that conversation forward with that sense of mutual connection before we try to deep dive into their challenges or trying to offer them a good or a service, because we can only do that once they kind of feel like they're in that circle of friendship. So let's try that first. Everyone on board with that? You guys ready for me to follow up tomorrow and the next day on that?
Yeah.
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 All right, perfect, guys. Well, that concludes the messaging training for today. We did some id pops, right? We talked about what the purpose of these messages is, what building rapport looks like, talked about maybe how to rescue a couple of bad conversations or things that haven't gone well. You might see a messaging conversation, maybe it went to a dead end or something like that. It doesn't mean that we can't fix it, just means that maybe our chances have gone down. I think I've effectively demonstrated how a conversation might be damaged and we might lose a business opportunity based on the way that we contact. And we know what it's supposed to look like when it starts and how important it is to use the right conversation starter. Does everyone agree with that? Are we all on the same page?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome, guys. Well, be mindful of this as you're going into your messaging. Remember that we have resources available. Use one another as a resource, and always be asking yourself, what is my goal? What is the goal with the message that I'm trying to accomplish? If you can keep your mind in that headspace as you're doing your messaging, it's going to get a lot more efficacious. Your closing statements are going to be more effective, and you're going to make the job easier for all of the people who exist on levels above you. And that's really what it's all about. And I have a commitment here to you guys that if you want to develop your sales skills, I'm going to be giving you guys millions of dollars in sales training. And this is what it looks like. It's about building rapport. It's about establishing that connection. And if you haven't, I do have that extra video on building rapport that I did post before. I believe I posted in chat a couple of times. Some of that discusses body language, which of course we're not doing in the confines of a messaging conversation, but many of those same lessons do hold true. So if you're trying to theme your conversations, I do recommend that you take a look at it again. It's only a few minutes, just it's me talking in an office, but those basic concepts of trying to get someone to see you as a member of their peer group, it's incredibly powerful, and it's going to change the way that people respond to these conversations. All right, thank you guys so much for your time, and I
Uh,
would recommend if
I've
when other
got a
people go into the sales channel, do remind them that we have these recorded sessions to keep on adding to the training. Did you have a question,
I've
Abhishek?
got a question. Yes, I've got a question. I saw a couple of conversations where the potential customer replied, and the reply was full of abbreviations specific to their industry.
Sure.
So, how do we go about those messages? Like, we won't. Seriously, I saw one of those messages. There were 5 points, and each of the points has like 2 or 3 abbreviations,
Well,
short forms.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you can't puzzle them out yourself, post them in the channel, and when you do that, do a link to the profile, post the message that has you confused, and then just go ahead and set it to a 1-day follow-up, right?
Okay.
So that you can just move on to the next message. That question is out there, and then either you get an answer in channel, and then you can click right back to that message and go ahead and send it, or maybe someone in management takes a look at it and they click at it and answer it and send it, or someone else gets that follow-up and then sees that answer in the sales channel. The idea is that we don't want to spend a whole bunch of our time spinning our wheels on a problem. What we really want, what we really need, is to get that KPI of closed phone calls up and to try to get quality leads and turn those quality leads into bookings. And that is only going to happen with good emotional connections. So if you get some technical questions, ask them.
Okay.
Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right,
Also,
guys.
one thing.
Yeah.
Just one last. Thing. There were conversations that we had an emotional rapport with, but but we were the ones that didn't connect back to them.
Right.
So
And that does happen sometimes. So one of the things, if we left them hanging,
yes,
you could say, message them and say, I'm so sorry that I lost our conversation as I got inundated with messages over the last few months. I was actually really interested in talking to you to answer your question, and then you go ahead and act as if the conversation had not been disrupted. The best way to do it is to just apologize, acknowledge, and move on. If you do that, generally people will pick a conversation up where they left it unless the emotional connection has been completely broken. To answer your question?
yes. Thank you.
Perfect. All right,
Anshul,
guys. Yep.
after this, I'll close this meeting. We have 15 minutes after this.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So can you join back?
Yeah, of course I will.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.